I'm really happy and delighted to have Philip and Cyril joining us today to share their expertise around Hoshin Kanri and sustainability and how those works together. So I will let the stage to Philip and Cyril, and then after the presentation, we'll have a Q&A session. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jocelyn. So it's a pleasure to have been invited onto this webinar to speak along with Cyril. So thank you everybody who's attended, and thank you for having me. Yeah, as Jocelyn said, my name's Philip Holt. I'm from the UK, as my accent probably betrays, but I've lived in the US and the Netherlands for several years. I'm back in the UK now, and I've worked across multiple countries globally over the years in an international career. Cyril and I first met when we were both working for GK in Aerospace back in 2019 when we met, and together helped to build our lean operating model and worked very closely as Cyril transformed the supply chain within GK in Aerospace. And this webinar is one that we first gave internally in GK in Aerospace to help people to understand how a methodology such as Hoshin Kanri is crucial when we want to make long-term transformational changes. And that's why we're presenting a webinar about Hoshin Kanri and sustainability, because we see Hoshin Kanri as a really critical enabler to any significant transformation, and especially something as long-term as a journey to becoming a sustainable organization and hopefully a sustainable world. So I'm going to take you first of all through what is Hoshin Kanri, how do we do Hoshin Kanri. Then we're going to hand over to Cyril. He'll talk about how to integrate sustainability. And then really, as the slide says, ask us anything. Any questions you've got, we'd be welcome to be challenged, answer questions, have a discussion. That's what we're all here for, right? So, as I say, I'm going to give you an introduction to Hoshin Kanri. And I mentioned GK in Aerospace. I've actually helped to deploy Hoshin Kanri across, first of all, Royal Philips, then Travelport, and most recently in GK in Aerospace. And it really is a key enabler of transformation. And I think the important thing about Hoshin Kanri, I have a definition on here, but I think the important thing about it is, in a world where opportunities are everywhere, it allows us to focus in on those few things that we're going to do really well. And that's how we make breakthrough. Without a technique such as Hoshin Kanri, we get really, really full on failure because we work on too many initiatives and we create too much work and too much of a resource drain for our organization. So Hoshin Kanri, as this definition says, it's about selecting those critical few breakthroughs that are going to really make a difference. It's a multi-year approach. Normally we have a horizon of about 3 to 5 years, and it translates our strategy into executable initiatives. It ideally should start from the top of the organization and cascade down to the point of impact. But I'm always very careful to say to people, if you're in an organization, particularly a larger organization that isn't yet embracing Hoshin Kanri, sometimes known as policy deployment, strategy deployment. If your organization isn't embracing this, it doesn't preclude you from doing it in your part of the business. You will still be able to make your strategy deployment better in your part of the business, even when the larger organization has not yet chosen to do so. So don't become paralyzed waiting for the larger organization to do this. I would really advocate that anybody who wants to make their part of the business better adopts Hoshin Kanri as a way of managing that. So I think it's important to differentiate Hoshin Kanri from daily management. Some businesses really struggle to do this, and it can be a challenge. But essentially, there's two key processes running in any business. One is getting the daily management, running the business on a day-to-day basis and delivering our customers' needs and delivering our budget and commitments to our shareholders, our owners, on a daily basis. And the second thing is we want to make that breakthrough. We want to deploy the strategy and grow the business, become better. And that's what we use Hoshin Kanri for. The two are very much connected. We have to do both, but it's extremely important that we can differentiate between the two, because often people mix their drinks and the two get too diluted by each other. This graphic that you'll see on the page now is really trying to show how daily management and breakthrough, Hoshin Kanri, interact. And what you'll see is there's a wedge in between, which we call Kaizen, that continuous improvement on a daily basis. And Kaizen relates to both the breakthrough and the daily management activity. But what we're trying to show here is the amount of time we would normally expect our people across the business, across the different layers of the business, to be spending on each of these activities. What you'll see is that a frontline team member, the people who are actually adding the value for the customer on a daily basis, whether that be in a service or a manufacturing environment, they should be spending the majority of their time on daily management, on doing the day-to-day activities and adding the value to the customer. But we should also be encouraging them, training them and empowering them to make their job better every single day. And that's what we call a Kaizen culture, a daily improvement culture. But daily management is making sure we deliver what we promise to our customers. Kaizen is the making what we do better every day. And the first level of leadership should be working on, again, their daily management, again, some Kaizen, but at that level, they should already be starting to work on some of the breakthrough activities. As we get up to a middle management level, you would expect probably about 50-50 of their time be between daily management and Kaizen and breakthrough and Kaizen. So you'd expect that they're spending about 50% of their time on that breakthrough activity. And what you'll see at the top here is that the top management, the more senior leaders in the organization, should be spending the majority of their time on breakthrough activity. And I think, to be honest with you, if you look at most organizations, it's very much a different story. You'll normally see that most of the top management are spending most of the time on what you can loosely call daily management, but we might more accurately call firefighting. And what's really important in an organization is that we get the day-to-day operations working really well so that we can devolve as much as possible to the people who are doing the work in that first level of leadership, allowing us the space to be creative and to deliver our breakthrough activity and deliver our strategy. So how do we do that? Well, the Hoshin Kanri planning cycle is something that I've used for a number of years now. It's been adapted and adopted from some of the work that first Toyota did, but also the Danaher Corporation did as well. And the X Matrix in particular is something that comes out of the Danaher Corporation's world. There's essentially a number of steps in this cycle, and what you'll see is that the majority of those steps is taken up by the planning activity. Like most things that we do to really, in a disciplined and effective way, make the business better, the more time we spend on planning, the quicker and more effective we can be in actually executing. So there's a number of steps that are about planning what we're going to deliver from a Hoshin perspective. So what you'll see in the grey chevron is the establishment of the organizational vision, mission and values and the strategy. Now that's something that most companies do. They have a strategic review process and they'll create, usually on an annual cycle, it'll be updated, but they'll create a long-term strategic vision for their organization. Where Hoshin Kanri kicks in is actually making that strategy executable, making it a reality. So the first step in the Hoshin Kanri planning cycle is to align on the strategic breakthroughs. What are the things we're going to actually do to make that strategy come alive? What are those 3 to 5 year objectives? What we'll then do is we'll bring those into annual objectives. We'll say, okay, over the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to deliver X, but what are we going to actually deliver during the next annual cycle? What's the next step we're going to make towards those strategic breakthroughs? What we then do is break those down into what we call annual improvement priorities. These are the actual projects, if you will, the things that we're going to do, the initiatives that we're going to undertake, which will actually deliver those objectives. And then we actually define what we call TTIs, targets to improve. They're synonymous with KPIs, key performance indicators, but we differentiate them as targets to improve because in Hoshin thinking, we're trying to generate and stimulate a breakthrough mindset. So we call them targets to improve because they're going to be audacious, they're going to be stretching, they're going to be targets that we might in the first instance not understand how we can actually deliver. And that's a key element of Hoshin Kanri. A key element of that breakthrough thinking is to challenge ourselves with targets that we don't yet know how to achieve. What we then do, and I'll explain this a little bit more in a slide or two, is we're going to assign black dot owners and cascade to the point of impact. What we mean by point of impact is taking the annual improvement priority and the targets to improve to the lowest possible point where the work is done on a daily basis to actually make that breakthrough happen at, as the name suggests, the point of impact. And I'll elaborate on that in a moment. So what you've seen there is the first of the planning steps or the first stage, which is the planning steps in Hoshin Kanri. We then move into plan and do, whereas we take those annual improvement priorities and we create action plans, real steps of action that we're going to take and deliver against, which will deliver our targets to improve. We then check performance. Normally the cycle is on a monthly cycle. We'll check performance against those TTIs using what's called a bowling chart. As you'll know, especially the US attendees, on bowling, you have a scorecard to see how you're doing throughout each of the rounds of the bowling. The bowling chart is very similar to that. We're looking on a month-by-month basis, how are we performing against our TTIs? And then finally, when we're not achieving exactly what we wanted to do, when we have any deviations, which will be often when we're trying to make breakthrough activity, we'll use a problem-solving A3 to act against any deviations from our plan, any deviations from our targets, and course correct. And then that cycle, as is implied by the fact that we use a cycle rather than a linear theme here, will be repeated the following year as we take the next step towards those strategic goals. So that's the Hoshin Kanri planning cycle. And I think during that explanation, I brought out a couple of points which I really want to re-emphasize with this slide. As I mentioned, we really need to differentiate between daily management and Hoshin Kanri. However, it's very much an and culture. To have that high performance culture, we need to do both. So we need to do daily management and Hoshin Kanri. So from a daily management perspective, we need to meet our commitment to the budget. That's the health of the business on a daily basis. And we need to also focus on the critical few strategic breakthrough priorities above the budget. We need to manage and incrementally improve our current business processes, the Kaizen that I mentioned before, to keep up with competition. And we need to define and implement best-in-class strategic processes and go the extra mile to outperform our competition. And then finally, we need to measure and action key performance indicators, KPIs, from a daily management perspective. And we need to measure and action aggressive stretch targets, those TTIs, those targets to improve, which force us to think differently. So on the left-hand side, you're seeing daily management, meeting the budget, doing what we said we would do, doing what we committed to do in our budget, and improving a little through Kaizen. On the right-hand side is about making those breakthroughs, making things significantly better than they were the previous year. And that's the high performance culture. And what I've tried to do here is visualize what I've been talking about in terms of how they run complementary to each other. So Hoshin is delivering the growth of the business. Daily management is delivering what we committed to do on the business. So you'll see on the left-hand side, we have that strategy, the vision, the mission, the purpose, the long-term objectives, and then our budget, our financial and operational KPIs. We run those through both the annual budget, daily management, we deliver our KPIs, but at the same time, we're delivering breakthrough impact. And overall, that impacts our business performance in terms of revenue, profit and loss, cash flow, and ultimately, if we're a listed company, our share price. And again, just to try and emphasize, because I think it's really important, this point, the difference, but also the complementary nature of daily management and Hoshin Kanri. In year 0, we have a baseline performance, and we've set ourselves a budgetary setting for year 1. That's the base plus some improvement. That's the Kaizen, the small level of improvement. But we've said through Hoshin Kanri, there's a breakthrough, there's a step in improvement that we're going to make. In year 2, though, that step we've made, we've now locked that in. That now becomes our daily management, our standard base performance. So in year 2, that base performance is increased to the level of year 1's totality. Then in year 2, again, we undertake some Kaizen and some Hoshin Kanri, and we set the new base for year 3 and so on. And in this example, it's a 4-year horizon, and by year 4, we've met our strategic objectives. However, just to emphasize how the cycle works, by the point we started to approach that year 4, we would have renewed our strategic objectives in reality and pushed them out another 3 to 5 years. So as with everything in life, you never actually reach the end. It's a continuous cycle of challenge and improvement. I mentioned in the planning phase, the X matrix, and this is very important. I've met a number of people who use Hoshin Kanri, but have never made the step towards using the X matrix, and it can be a little bit off-putting. I use it because when I started doing Hoshin Kanri, and this was around 15, 16 years ago, I was taught to do it without the X matrix because, and in quotes, it's too complicated. After about 3 or 4 years, I met somebody who was an ex-Danaher employee who'd been heavily involved in Danaher's success through the Hoshin process. They taught me how to use the X matrix, and I never looked back. I really believe in the X matrix as an elegant way of bringing your strategy execution into one page. So my advice, and obviously this isn't a training session, so I'm not going to go into the actual depth of teaching you how to use the X matrix, but if this has interested you, then I would suggest that you really investigate it, and I would also advise you to use the X matrix because it really does work. And what you'll see in the X matrix, and I'll bring back some of the things that I talked about earlier, is we said that the first step in the Hoshin Kanri planning cycle was to set those 3 to 5 year breakthrough objectives. And what you'll see in the X matrix is that in this section here at what would be 6 o'clock, if this was a clock, is the breakthrough thinking, the 3 to 5 years time horizon. And you'll maybe notice that there's probably about space to put 3 or 4 breakthrough objectives there. Again, we're really trying to limit the amount of breakthrough objectives we put in there. And what you'll see here on this explanation is that we want to ensure that we're really having significant and stretch goals. So it should be significantly beneficial in terms of either people, safety, growth, quality, delivery, performance, revenue. It should be customer value focused. It should build a competitive advantage. It should be multifunctional to deliver. So this should be something that's about working across the functions. And it should be defined as a gap, a from to type of description. So for example, by 2028, we will have increased sales in the APAC region from $260 million per year to $450 million per year, maintaining EBITDA at 14%. So something that's stretching and really needs us to think differently to achieve. We then move to the what would be the 9 o'clock position. Those are where we select our annual breakthrough objectives. And we say, how far on that journey are we going to go this year? So they're a derivation of the strategic objectives with a 1-year time horizon. It might not be possible to do a straight line of improvement across each of the 3 to 5 years, but it's important not to backload the breakdown, avoid the hockey stick. It's very much human nature to say, okay, in this example above, we're going to go from 260 million to 450 million. Yeah, but in this first year, we'll just go to 280 million. It's easy to sandbag. What I would always say is, let's stretch ourselves in the first year. How do we get to $350 million in the first year? How do we really challenge ourselves to think differently? Again, it's Hoshin, it's breakthrough thinking. So we need to be thinking ambitiously. We need to be asking ourselves, have we stretched ourselves enough? And again, it needs to be defined as a gap from 2. We then go into our annual improvement priorities at the 12 o'clock position. And this is where we start to say, what are the initiatives which will deliver the annual objectives? And this is where the owners and the team members of the initiatives will be given the opportunity to take ownership for how to deliver. And this is an important part of Hoshin Kanri. It's top down in the sense of what we need to achieve, what's the strategy for the business, but how we achieve that is very much up to the team members. So there's a lot of empowerment here. And when we're deriving the AIPs, the annual improvement priorities, and the targets to improve, we play what's called catch ball, where the senior leadership and the teams who are working on the AIPs iteratively work together to agree on the approach. So we're going to determine which key initiatives we're going to do. We're going to determine which key processes define the performance. We're going to identify root causes using problem solving to bridge the gap. We're going to establish if those countermeasures will lead to sustainable results-oriented processes. And we'll begin with an action verb. We'll talk about reduce or increase, and we'll require an iterative approach, the catch ball that I talked about a moment ago. We then create the TTIs, these targets to improve. They're at that 3 o'clock position. And they're essentially the Hoshin Kanri AIPs, and they're the targets, metrics to be met by the end of the annual cycle. And they must measure progress and effectiveness, use both leading and lagging indicators. They need to be able to be broken down into at least monthly increments, have the format of from X to Y by date Z, and there should be a stretch beyond the budget targets. Don't mix budget and Hoshin Kanri targets. And there shouldn't be an automatic straight line. The target progression must reflect the activities and the milestones throughout the year. We then want to put the AIP owners and team members in place. So we say who owns the annual improvement priority and which team members will they need. And it's really important to make sure that we get the capacity and skills matched up correctly. The best AIP teams are cross-functional. They have sufficient full-time or primary resources, and we also know what our support and secondary resources are. They have one clear owner with the authority and accountability to deliver, and they have only team members with the capacity and skills and the manager's commitment. And then finally, the final step, very important again, is what we call connecting the dots. And this is where we check that all of the correlations work out. And this is by identifying with dots either a primary correlation or a secondary correlation, whether actually the targets to improve, if we meet them, will they deliver the AIPs? If we deliver those AIPs, will they deliver the annual breakthrough objectives? And if we deliver the annual breakthrough objectives, will they deliver the first step in those 3 to 5 year breakthrough objectives? And then in the 3 to 5 year breakthrough objectives, do they correlate with the targets to improve? So it's a way of checking. And as I say, it can seem a bit daunting to begin with, but it is honestly a very, very effective approach once we've got it working and once you understand and the team understands how to use it. So my final slide is really just to summarize some of the key points. So Hoshin Kanri is the way that we turn strategy into execution. And with the focus that Cyril's going to talk about next in terms of sustainability, which is a really long-term strategic value for a business, then using something like Hoshin Kanri to keep us focused on that long-term improvement is absolutely key. It's a team sport. It should be cross-functional and preferably end-to-end value stream and organizational wide. It's a long-term focus. It's 3 to 5 years, continually refreshing, but with those short-term annual deliverables. It's about consistency of purpose, but with the agility to pivot in the approaches we learn. There's a dichotomy in Hoshin Kanri in the sense that it's a very disciplined and structured approach, but it's also very flexible as we problem solve and learn to allow us to pivot as we need to. And it delivers breakthrough results, significantly more than our budget. but in only a few areas, 3 to 5 areas normally, versus failure or mediocre results in many areas. So the visual here is really trying to show, instead of missing the target on many things and tiring your people out, use Hoshin to really hit the bullseye with 3 to 5 critical breakthrough objectives. So I'll hand over to Cyril now. Hopefully I've not taken up too much time, because I really think it's important to listen to Cyril. Over to you, Cyril.
Well, that's fine. As usual, you've done most of the work anyway. And so thank you, Philip. Just a quick introduction from myself. So Cyril Fougerouse from Supply Chain Sensei. After 25 years in industry as an operations and supply chain professional, I started my consultancy, and I love my new job. And 5 years ago, actually, I started to think about, after using Hoshin Kanri 10 years already in different environment, automotive, heavy industry, or aerospace businesses, I started to think, well, I started to find some interest in looking at supply chain sustainability, and I thought, well, how can we leverage that great tool of converting strategy and the mission of the business into actionable activities for all employees down the organization? How can we use that great tool to start a sustainability journey in businesses? Let's go to the next slide, Philip, please. And so my first advice is definitely to create in your different businesses a sense of urgency. Okay, not all executive committees, not all CEOs, not all senior leadership are, let's say, sensitive to sustainability matters. So it's really important to create a sense of urgency, to create that burning platform, which is gonna change the direction, which is gonna make more people aware of what's coming. And a good way to do that is obviously to engage with your peers and senior leaders. I mean, you just have to open the newspaper or watch the news on TV every day, right? There's never a day without some kind of mention with on topics with regard to sustainability, whether it's around climate, the fires, the droughts, the floods, whether it's on political unrest on certain areas, whether it's about child labor, whether it's about corruption. I mean, there's all kinds of news every day that gives us an opportunity to engage with our peers and senior leaders. Also, it's really important to notice that the behaviors are changing around us, okay, and around us as a business and around us as persons, okay. For businesses, the customers are changing their behaviors. Some customers are not ready anymore to buy from companies that do not show that they engage into sustainability matters and that do not produce products and services in a sustainable way. Shareholders are starting to change. Okay, you see more and more private equity or venture capitalists, asking for supply chain roadmaps, for KPIs, for plans, for objectives, and asking also executives to commit on targets and sustainability targets and things like that. So, so this is also changing. The workforce is changing also. The staff in businesses is changing. You have more and more people that are really care about sustainability matters, and they want to see their employers, go in the right way and making the right choices, the right strategic decisions around sustainability. Another good way also to start highlighting those different topics is to look at the cost of to use, let's say, the current processes you have in your business, the current KPIs, the current processes, to make visible where your business in any ways, whether it's customer service, your inventory, your transport costs, your productivity, is impacted by not taking into account sustainability issues. Okay. So I put a couple of pictures here on that slide to just took a couple of examples, to pick those couple of examples on the bottom right here. It just took me 5 minutes on the internet. So there's plenty of opportunities to discuss about sustainability. And also a good way to do that, and we'll talk a bit more about this in the coming slides, is to use the existing resources. Okay. There are some resources available that I mentioned here in the SCM, and also there are starting to be some internationally some standard certifications and things like that around sustainability and how good businesses are at sustainability. B Corp being one of them. Okay, let's move to the next slide, please. And so Philippe mentioned quickly how effective the use of the X matrix is in developing and deploying Hoshin Kanri principles to convert strategy into action. And I want to emphasize the fact that there are certain places in the X matrix where you can really use the existing standards, existing international standards, to input your X matrix. Okay. And so in box number 1 here, where you set your strategic, your breakthrough objectives, and you define your breakthrough thinking, the so-called 6 o'clock position in the X matrix, my recommendation is to use some of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. If you are not familiar with those, I will recommend that you go take a look. Those 17 goals really present the landscape of sustainability as a whole, whether this is related to people, to the planet, or any other aspects of sustainability are very, very well defined. Okay. My recommendation is to choose 1 or 2 of these for your sustainability journey as a business, the ones that are more relevant for your business. Okay. Philippe mentioned in the 9 o'clock position, the first, let's say, breakdown of those strategic objectives into what are we going to achieve in the coming year in the 9 o'clock position. Here again, you can leverage one of the global standards, which is Global Compact. Again, if you're not familiar with this, I will really recommend that you go check the Global Compact, internet sites. There's plenty of really good material here and documentation. There's plenty of examples of KPIs and companies that have applied all those great concepts. Okay. So that's one of the link with the X matrix. I'm going to show another one in the next slide, and this is the measure. So at the 3 o'clock position, when we deploy Hoshin Kanri through the X matrix, we ask ourselves, how are we going to measure that we deliver on those target to improve that Philippe mentioned? Okay. A good way to do that is to move to the famous triple bottom line matrix and define for your own businesses metrics that are not only financial metrics, but that are balanced. Okay. Some metrics with regard to the planet, some metrics with regard to the people, whether it's your own people or the community that your organization is working in, and obviously the profit. So the famous 3 Ps, right? So take a look at having a balanced set of metrics and move to the triple bottom line metrics. Okay. I mentioned those 2 examples here of those 3 key elements for me as setting a sense of urgency, using the existing standards, Global Compact, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and moving to triple bottom line through the use of Hoshin Kanri and the X matrix. This has been really useful for me to use those couple of tools and those resources. I've been able to apply in some medium-sized industrial companies, in a startup in the food industry, and it's been really effective to combine, let's say, the power, how powerful the Hoshin Kanri process is, and at the same time add some sustainability items into that. Next slide, please. I think is up for questions. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Philip. Thank you, Cyril. So we'll open up for question. I think we already have 2 questions on the chat. So we'll start by those questions from Leo saying, are there any areas of overlap that you notice with the balanced scorecard framework or other strategy frameworks?
So maybe I'll take that. Yeah, I mean, there's overlaps in terms of the way that we might measure how we're performing against the execution of the strategic goals. What I would say is, and I've seen this in a couple of companies, is the balanced scorecard sometimes gets mixed. I call it mixing the drinks, when what we see is that people mix between the budget commitments, the daily management commitments, and the strategic objectives. What I like about the Hoshin Kanri process is that we end up with a distinct bowling chart, a distinct focus on breakthrough objectives that are separate from the daily management goals. And that is absolutely critical, because there's 2 different mindsets that need to be applied. Your daily management is about meeting those commitments, and you have to meet those commitments, right? That's what you've told your customer you're going to do. You're going to deliver to them what you said you would deliver, when you said you would deliver it, at the price that you said you would deliver it, at the right quality. Okay, and without, in the spirit of this, without any sustainability issues. You're going to do it ethically, and you're going to do it really well. So that's daily management, and you must do that. Whatever your targets are for that, you've got to hit those targets. That's what you've got to do. With Hoshin Kanri, we have a slightly different mindset. We're going to set ourselves ambitious goals. We're going to say we're going to improve by 40%. We're not going to say, okay, we're only going to improve by 5%. And one of the things I battle with the most when I'm working with companies to implement Hoshin Kanri is the negotiations that happen, where somebody says, okay, well, all right, we're going to be ambitious. All right, I reckon we could do that by 8%. My question is always, well, why is it not by 30 or 40%? Well, we don't know how to do that. Exactly. That's what Hoshin Kanri is all about. Now, if we can separate the 2 so people feel safe to make ambitious targets, knowing that if they aim for 30% and hit 25%, that's going to be celebrated, then that's great. So I'm not sure, hopefully I answered your question. Please let me know if I missed the meaning of your question, but hopefully that answered it.
Yeah, I can see, while we're waiting for the answer, I can see a question here, or let's say a comment that says the X metric looks frightfully similar to QFD, quality function deployment, and maybe I can say a few words about that. So the answer is yes, absolutely. Okay, it looks similar. It's not the same though. I mean, document yourself and check how the X matrix works really in details. However, it works in the same way that it ensures alignments between all the different elements. Okay, it makes sure that there is a great alignment between the 5-year breakthrough objectives that are linked to the mission and the strategic objectives, and the actual activities that people are going to perform on a day-to-day basis, let's say in the lower levels of the organization. So the fact that it ensures full alignment between long-term strategic objectives and more short-term activities to improve and deliver breakthrough activities is definitely a similarity with the QFD matrix.
Is there other question from the team?
There's one there from Jeff about which tools do you suggest to track TTIs and measure success over time? Yeah, I mean, there's quite a few, and I'm not going to kind of promote any particular provider, so I won't mention names, but there's quite a few providers of software nowadays to manage the Hoshin Kanri process. You can also use, you know, an Access database and set that up if you know somebody who's pretty smart who can do that. I'd be honest with you, and I'm normally a pretty early adopter with technology, but when I'm teaching Hoshin, I always want people to first of all start off very simply using normally an Excel spreadsheet with the X matrix in it. And the reason for that is I want people to understand the process and learn the process before we automate it. And I find sometimes if we have very slick, clever software, it can get in the way of people's understanding of the process. And the kind of the software overtakes it. So yes, the answer is very, you know, there are plenty of software providers out there. And if you want to contact me offline, I can point you in the direction of a couple who I think are credible. But I would advise to try and get the process running, let's call it manually, you know, use a SharePoint or whatever, but try and do it, you know, more traditionally whilst you understand the process.
Yeah, and before we go to Preston, I just want to add to this that, you know, please don't spend any money on technology before you're sure that you've done your job on people and process. Okay, people, understanding the philosophy, the culture, the mindset of Hoshin Kanri, holding people accountable is part of it, right? And as well, you know, running the process at least, you know, 2-3 cycles before you spend any money on technology, or else you're going to spend money on technology, set up the tool, and you're going to find out in 1 or 2 cycles that people didn't buy in, or they don't understand, or are not developing Hoshin Kanri with the right mindset, or you set up your system in a way that is not fit for purpose to what you need on the process side of things in terms of reporting, visuals, whatever. So people and process first before you spend any money on technology.
Preston?
Yeah, just wanted to open up the conversation about science-based tasks. And that it has in it as a planning methodology, 5-year, they call it short term, 5 to 7 year lengths, and they're very disciplined in that the commitments have to be made. So there's scrutiny, milestones, etc. I'd just like to really think through or have some discussion about, or your thoughts on whether this methodology would fit into that, meaning they're making demands. This might be the tool to help people work through and satisfy them. And it's actually pretty critical because you could see that a substantial number of folks who commit to this process, the SBTI process, actually get decertified and they have to start all over again, meaning they didn't hit the milestones, they weren't well thought out, or whatever the case may be. How do you visualize this methodology fitting within that SBTI framework? Meaning it's more of the tool that actually gets the job done versus SBTI forcing a rigor on your commitments. I hope I made sense. That's what it seems to me that SBTI does. It forces a rigor.
Yeah. So I think perhaps, Preston, they could be complementary. I think one of the things I didn't show in my slide pack, because for a webinar you have to be very careful not to have too many slides, but you know, there's some statistics here which I think probably underpins what you're saying about the number of people who the SBTI process fails, and that's that less than 15% of companies routinely track how they perform over how they thought they were going to perform with their strategic goals. 95% of employees don't actually understand their company's strategy, and 86% of executive teams spend less than 1 hour per month reviewing strategy. And if you think about those statistics, I think that probably goes some way to explain why people are struggling even in a rigorous framework like SBTI. And I think what Hoshin is good about, and I think Cyril hit the nail on the head, it's not about the tool, it's about a different way of thinking, and it's around an engagement of everybody around the delivery. And most of the work you put into making Hoshin work is around that alignment and collaboration of people.
Mhm.
And when you get that alignment and collaboration, then you're much more likely to deliver your goals. And perhaps, I'm not too familiar with SBTI, but perhaps that rigor is at the expense of really engaging people. And perhaps that's where it falls over.
Mhm.
Adding to this, and firstly, I must say I'm not familiar at all with SBTI, so I don't know what it is. But I want to comment on a couple of things that you said, Preston. One of them is the relationship of people with time and the time horizons. Okay, we are very familiar with that in supply chain management. It's really important to understand the time horizons, the time fences, and those kinds of things. I would like to say two things. The first one is people's relation to time can be very different and very relative from one person to another. Okay. One exercise you could do, right, in a meeting room with people around you, is ask people to close their eyes, okay, and represent with their hands how long for them is 1 month, okay. And then everybody opens the eyes and you can see, okay, and you will find that for some people 1 month is like this, okay, and for some other people 1 month is like this. Okay, so that's one thing to understand. And the other one, which Philippe mentioned, in a typical Hoshin cycle, we're going to look 3 to 5 years out. Okay, I think this must be adjusted to the types of businesses you're in, just like SNOP. Okay, SNOP for a garage down 2 blocks down the road is not the same time horizon at SNOP for NASA, right? So SNOP for NASA is probably 50 years, okay? SNOP for Airbus or Boeing is probably 25, 30 years, or for nuclear plants, nuclear power plants, probably 50 to 60 years. If you're in the automotive, an SNOP is probably 5 years, okay? Something like that. So you also have to adjust, let's say, the parameters of your Hoshin cycle to the types of business you're in, okay, in terms of time horizons.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate that explanation.
Do we have other questions from the group? I have one. When people are looking for others, is usually what I've seen in companies is they set their strategic targets beginning of the year, and then they don't really go back through that, to your point about your statistics, Philippe. So what are your experience or advice to be able to the right review that should happen to go back through that and review or make update to this X matrix and Hoshin Kanri throughout the year?
Yeah, absolutely, Jocelyn. So what should happen is there should be at least a monthly review cycle. So you would expect that the teams actually delivering the AIPs, the annual improvement priority projects, would be probably meeting on at least a weekly basis. So they would be keeping each other up to date on a weekly basis. But as a leadership team, it should be a maximum interval of 1 month between. So you should be reviewing it 12 times a year, essentially. And each month is your opportunity to say, are we winning or losing? Are we doing what we said we'd do? And most of the focus, at least in the first half of the year, is going to be on, are we actually delivering the actions we said we would do in the action plan? We'll be looking at the lagging indicators, the results coming out, but a lot of it will be looking at, are we actually having the impact with the actions that we said we would? And are we actually executing against them? And that's going to be the big test. And if a company does that with rigor, then they're going to be successful by the end of the year. And by successful with Hoshin Kanri, it doesn't mean that they've precisely hit the targets. Remember, we're setting these ambitious targets, but we're going to all feel, and I deliberately use the word feel, we're all going to feel collectively that we're achieving the objectives of this breakthrough activity that we're undertaking. And if you don't have that monthly review, you're not going to be successful. I think linking it back to Preston's question earlier, you know, probably one of the problems with the SBTI initiative is it's very much focused on sustainability improvements, you know, environmental and sustainability improvements, which everybody can get excited about and set, but are they setting them in isolation? Are they setting those in a bubble, a vacuum, away from the business strategy? And if that's what's happening, I can guarantee you're going to fail. Again, Hoshin Kanri brings everything together, and it makes you make the difficult decisions and the difficult choices about what you're not going to do. And that's what you'll see on a monthly basis. Every time I've run this with every leadership team I've ever done, they do too much in the first cycle. The first cycle, they try to do too much. They've got a shopping list of objectives, and no matter how much you challenge them, they're convinced they can do them. By the time you get to month 3 and half those initiatives haven't even started, you can then have an honest discussion about, well, come on, we're not really going to be able to achieve all of this, are we? And then you can start to make those difficult decisions. And again, you'll often find that the sustainability ones are the most difficult ones to get going.
Yeah, they're ambitious, very ambitious.
They're very ambitious, but they're also not what people care about on a daily basis, no matter what they'll tell you. I'm saying the quiet bit out loud there, but that's what most people don't care about them on a daily basis. And that's why Hoshin is so important to make sustainability work.
Yeah. I'm going to ask a question to the audience, right? I mean, from your expertise in supply chain management, because all of you on that call are supposed to be the supply chain management professionals, right? What is the process we use in supply chain management to review if our operation and plans are in line with strategy on a monthly basis? SNOP, right?
Right.
SNOP, okay. On a monthly basis in SNOP, what do? We check that our operation and plans, product portfolio plan, demand plan, production plan, inventory plans, financial plans, and supply plans, etc., are aligned to our strategic objectives and that we do what we say we were going to do. Okay. And so for me, using SNOP to review on a monthly basis your TTI is a very good way. Okay. Is a very good way. It's an established process. There is a rhythm. There is the discipline. You know, why don't you use that process? It's there. Why would you start something new?
Yeah. Just to make a comment, I think Hoshin is a discovery for me, and it really fills a need in the planning side for sustainability. It really does. I think the SBTI is needed because people were green coding. They were doing all kinds of strange things, and they had no idea that there was a need for discipline. SBTI that says, hey, there is a need for discipline, and there is a need to be accountable. And when you make a commitment, we will check and we will vet you, and we will do audits. But they didn't have the tools, and I think this might be the tool to help people do a good job of honoring those commitments. And the horizons are the same. I'm misusing the word spiritually, but spiritually, I think SBTI and this methodology, this approach actually connect together. They look like there's no incompatibilities. So that's what's been missing. If you look at the GHG protocol, there's project, they give some direction on how to execute projects, but I haven't seen anything to date other than what you've just shown us today that really deals with the planning side at a level that's credible. Everybody talks about collaboration and all that stuff, but they don't have any way of tracking it and driving it down to every level of the company is what's been missing. It's either sits up here or when it comes down in a panic mode because they're being threatened at the senior level because of company performance, either financially or their response to sustainability and climate change. But I really think this has been, for me, eye-opening. I appreciate you guys taking the time to make us aware and educate us.
You're very welcome.
Actually, yes, thank you for that. Actually, Hoshin Kanri is very collaborative. You know, if it's done the right way, it's very collaborative. And Philippe didn't go into too much details here, but there are some techniques to cascade, the different X matrices from the top down to each and every employee, and the famous point of impact, right? And so it's a great way to drive alignment and engagement, okay? So that when you are in a working team, in an office or on the shop floor, and you're going to be working to improve this, then you can track that back all the way up to one of your strategic objective, and makes it very very powerful.
And that could be some topic for our next webinar in a couple of months, to your point, because I have experienced the Hoshin Kanri with GKN together, and it's definitely a very powerful tool as well to cascade those strategic objectives down to every individuals and people. So, all right, we have like 1 minute for a last question. If anybody wants or comments from the group.
Yes, I have a question. I was curious kind of to your points about S&OP, if you've heard of any companies that have implemented sustainability into their S&OP process successfully.
Answer is yes. Yeah, I've done that recently with a UK business in the boating industry, and they have a couple of strategic objectives as part of their Hoshin Kanri, which is around sustainability, around the impact they have on their communities, the communities where they work, as well as some CO2 emission objectives, and they do review where they stand versus their breakthrough objectives on a monthly basis as part of the S&OP process. So I had the chance to support the team to implement such such KPIs and deploying an S&OP process that includes sustainability targets and reviewing sustainability action plans. And then the worst thing that can happen is having those sustainability plans in a vacuum or in parallel to the process you're supposed to use on a monthly basis to drive and manage the business. Okay, if it's in parallel and in a vacuum, then you're going to have a couple of sustainability employees tagged with the sustainability department or whatever, swimming in the pool, and you're going to have plenty of others watching them swimming in the pool. And you want everybody to swim. Okay, so let's use the business processes you use to drive your business, to make business decisions, to incorporate those sustainability objectives.
Great, thank you so much. That was a great answer.
All right, so I would like to thank you again, Philippe, Cyril, for that webinar. It was very, very insightful, very great presentation. Thank you everyone for joining. We're going to put the recording on our website and broadcast it also on LinkedIn so that people can join and go and review that. So thank you everyone for joining, and we'll keep you posted for the next webinar we're going to have in the chapter. Thank you.